Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to another discussion video with your furry, slightly older JD Estrada. So, it is a tea with JD. It is a discussion video because why not? And today I am having some lovely piping hot tea courtesy of the Rooted Dandelion. And this is called the Slayer. The Slayer includes green tea, lemongrass, lemon peel, nettle, ginger, marshmallow root, and dandelion leaf. My experience from that sip, and let me check another one. I think the predominant flavors are lemongrass and nettle. I think that's the most that I get in my palate. Anyways, it's a discussion video, so let's discuss. We're gonna be talking about series because I finished a series, but I also finished reading a series. I read His Dark Materials, and I have thoughts. And I think most people do. So when I picked up this series, someone was like, "Oh, that is so awesome. That is one of my favorite series." But after the first book, it kind of goes downhill, which makes me wonder how it can be one of your favorite series if it goes downhill. But reading it, I kind of understand it. So the Golden Compass, which I think is called Northern Lights in the UK or originally, then the Subtle Knife, then the Amber Spyglass. So each of these titles corresponds to a device in this series. And this series is interesting, but I do agree with the sentiment that the first book is the one. So the Golden Compass, it's been adapted to a film. The film kind of sucked in comparison to the book by far. I know that's normally the default setting, but in this occasion, the movie really comes up short in terms of what, you read the book and then you see the movie and you go like, yeah, that was a drop in quality. So this book is sensational. The world building in this book, I have no notes on. It's a different world. It's a parallel world. There's some weird stuff going on, and everyone, with the exception of polar bears, can see their spirit, and they're connected directly to their spirit. The concepts that come in this book, the alethiometer. The alethiometer is like this symbol reader, weird contraption that people use to kind of predict the future or try to find out what's going on with what. It's an interesting concept. It reads beautifully, it sounds beautiful. Definitely a very curious thing. Lyra Belacqua, who is the protagonist and should always be the protagonist in this series, she is very likable. She is a spitfire. She's very curious. The thing is that kids are being abducted and they don't know what's going on. Kids are disappearing. So you establish that situation. Why am I explaining this? Normally when I discuss a book, I don't go into plot points, but it is worth noting what I'm mentioning and you'll see why. So, parallel world, you can see your demon, D-A-E-M-O-N, thusly spelled, not the D-E-M-O-N, which is, it's something that they talk about the difference later. Okay, so you can see your demon, you can embrace your demon, and that is your spirit animal, and you have that connection, and you're literally tethered to your spirit. That is a fascinating concept, one that I fell in love with. This world, they explore different things, and it is almost a parallel world because there's an Oxford, but not the one that we have in this world. Why do I make this distinction? Hold, we shall get there. So this is YA, this is fantasy, this is big concepts, fascinating stuff. The rhythm is there, the writing is there, the plot points are there. It ends with a literal bang, and you don't know what the hell is going to happen. But every step of the way, new information that's presented, you're constantly fascinated. You get to know the Egyptians, which are gypsy people, that get along in boats, and then you meet the polar bears, and then you have mentions and you see glimpses of witches. So already we have 3 people, 3 races, apart from the humans. Okay, it's a lot of information, but here it is handled and balanced and maneuvered and crafted beautifully. No notes. It is a 5-star book for me. It is a book that has weight to it. And then we have this book, which I struggled with. So here, Lyra is the hero. She is the protagonist. She is awesome. And for some reason, Philip Pullman decided that we needed another protagonist, which is Will. Okay. Will versus Lyra. Lyra's super likable. She's super cool. She's she's a young lass. Will is a young boy who's in kind of a complicated situation in his life. And he escapes to another world. So did he escape to Lyra's world? No. At the end of the first book, something happens and we end up in another world. So we have a third world now in this book. Sorry if this is kind of a spoiler. I'm trying to keep it as top level as possible, but there's a third world here. Okay. What's wrong with that? This third world is post-apocalyptic, like with zombies and stuff. But it's not zombies, it's specters. And it's stuff like that. Specters are like soul-sucking zombies. Think of it that way. So, you have Will and Lyra that meet in a new world that is being overrun by specters. There's no mention of pretty much most of the concepts that are established in the first book, with the exception of the alethiometer. So, connection, okay? In the first book, I was fascinated by the relationship with Egyptians. I was fascinated by polar bears. In this book, there's barely a mention of both of those people, and the focus goes to the witches. We also have mentions that there are angels. We shall get to that. So, we have all this stuff. The concept of the alethiometer, which appears in this book and appears subsequently, is a complicated one. How they explain it is done in a very interesting way, but it's a complicated concept. So you have that, you have the demons, you have the Egyptians, you have the polar bears, you have a lot of stuff. You have the baddies when they explain them and what they're doing. And then in the second book, the baddies are still around, but you see that people go from one world to another because there are several parallel worlds. How do you get from one parallel world to another? By using what is known as the subtle knife. Again, don't mean to give spoilers, but we need to talk about the subtle knife. So the subtle knife is a knife forged by who knows. It is another complicated concept. So the subtle knife, you can cut a window into a new world. How do you find the world, the world that you want to go to? The explanation that you're given about the alethiometer is Pullman tries to apply it to the subtle knife, but in a different way. So it's the same but different concept, and it's like, Basically, the wielder of the knife has to feel through the fabric of time and goes like, and then basically based off feel, he knows the world that he's cutting into. Okay. There are myriads of worlds, and you can go from one world to another, and it doesn't matter. And from the same place, you can. Right now, I have the subtle knife. You'll get this reference if you've read the book. So, I got the subtle knife. I cut a window into a world. I'm like, that's not good. It's not ideal. I see bedrock. I'm on top of a cliff, on top of a mountain. So I I close that one in a very odd way. Then I open another window to another world, the same place. In the same place, I cut the same window, same size window, but I feel through another world and I use the Force without calling it the Force. It's odd. It's interesting, but it's odd. And why do I say that it's odd? Because every new concept that I get in book one makes sense, feels real, feels like it's part of the world, you're invested in that world. Whereas here, it's like, okay. And I constantly tripped on, okay. As mentioned, if you love the Egyptians and the polar bears, tough luck. You won't get them here. You will get a lot of witch lore, which is interesting, and to explain that more, but I just feels like everything's an afterthought. Everything that was established in the first novel that is not Lyra is an afterthought. So you have Mrs. Coulter, who is the main antagonist in the first book. Lord Asriel, who is a weird type of dude. He's an antagonist, but not, but yes, but not, but yes, but not, but yes, but not. And the entire series goes from yes and not continuously. So, yeah. Weird. So, rather than a misstep, this feels like no one told Philip Pullman, like, dude, enough ideas. So, is this book good? It is good. It is as good. Is it as good as this one? No, by a lot. It feels like a misstep and a drop off. So, here we have the subtle knife, the explanation of the subtle knife. Further feeding the fire that Mrs. Coulter is a bitch. And she shows some mean things, some mean parts to who and how she is. I won't go into details, but if you thought she was a bitch in the first book, this book will not do anything to deter you from that. So, by the end of this book, again, sorry, spoilers ahead, but I need to discuss the series, so I have to discuss major plot points. Will and Lyra are separated. Quoi? So, the main protagonist, whom I love in this book, joins up with someone, and the sum of the parts doesn't feel as much, and then at the end of this story, they are separated. Okay, I mentioned that the writing in this book was spot on, it's perfect, and some people might consider it too flowery. I thought it was spot on. Again, super enjoyable. I devoured this and I struggled with this. These are books, this is YA, this is adventure, this is fantasy, these are high stakes, people will die. The thing is that when people die in this book, you feel it. And in this book, when someone dies, literally the author says, and they died. 6 pages later, and this other person died. Lazy much. It bothered me. It bothered me, and I think it's clear that it bothered me. So, we come into book 3. Let's assess something. So, longer than this, shorter than this. This is the longest one. The third book, The Amber Spyglass, is the longest one. By the way, in the second one, we have other concepts. And they try to explain a bit about demons and a bit about dust. Dust is the main concept and how it's defined, what it is. It's a little out there, it's a bit aloof, and they try to give you scientific explanations and even interventions from the real world. This one, because Will is from this world, I think. There's another character that explains that. And there's an equivalent of the alethiometer in our world that is computer-based. So, we get into this book. We had a lot of ideas. We have even more ideas, and the ideas established in this book, a lot of them were, oh, let's keep it to the side. We don't need to talk about that. And then we had more ideas. So naturally, we don't need new ideas in this one. Wrong. Philip Pullman throws the kitchen sink in terms of concepts. Wow. So we already have the Egyptians. We already have witches. We already have polar bears. We have other types of humans. I'm not gonna get into the details because he didn't either. Eskimo people. Hey, whatever. In this book, oh, and in The Subtle Knife, we also get the mention of angels. In this book, we have a ton of exposition on angels. And we don't see, and Lyra is absent of about the first third of this book. Eventually she comes back. Won't explain why, won't explain what happened. We'll only say that she didn't die and that she comes back. So Will, whom in the balance between Lyra and Will, Lyra is a little cooler and has a little more weight. Will is okay. I won't say he's bad as a character. I'm just going to say that you gave me a fantastic character and then you're trying to give me another one that is like, okay. Okay, fine. To further explain the plot of what Lord Asriel is doing, they show that Lord Asriel is trying to get forces from I don't know what to fight against I don't know whom. I don't want to get into specifics, but you get much more in detail with how the angels are, what they look like, how they behave, what they do. There's a relationship here between two angels, which is an interesting twist, and again, more information. And then a character from this book makes it into this book, into another world. So we have Lyra's world, we have Will's world, which is our world. We have this other third world, which is explored in detail in this book. Citagase is the city. It's not the name of the world. We don't get the name of the world, so it's a little disorienting. Here, we get another world. We get two new races. The Galvespians, which are tiny pygmy people. That had not appeared anywhere in these two books. And a race called the Mulefa. And in the Mulefa, that's another world. And that's another species. And they go way into detail with the Mulefa and kind of into detail with the Galvespians. And the situation that's happening with the Mulefa has a lot of weight into it. And then who were the antagonists in the first two books are nothing in comparison to the antagonists in the third book. So you see where I'm going in terms of like, dude, how many ideas do you want? Where this series starts and where this ends, it's two very different places. In this one, we have epic, high fantasy, portal fantasy, parallel worlds, big concepts. Here, it almost ends up in a love story. And if you're confused with that statement, I was as confused as a reader. The writing here is way better than the second book. The second book pissed me off. He died. Dude, cabrón. Someone died. Give it some weight. So, book 3, they discuss the Mulefa in detail. And when I say detail, I'm talking 20 pages of exposition. The writing, I really enjoyed it, but it's like another huge idea. And it's like, how many ideas do you want to pull through and putting a pin on the others? And then eventually he tries to bring everything together in the end, and it's okay. So, by far the best. A decent conclusion, kind of a misstep, kind of pissed me off. Too many ideas. Why do I want to discuss this? Because I finished writing this and I was freaking out because I was like, man, I have too many ideas. I have too many concepts. I said, no, I'm fine. And I am consistent in terms of if you don't like it, whoa, see, they fall down. If you don't like the first book, you probably won't like the second or the third book. But if you like the first book, you will like the second and the third book because it feels cohesive. This does not feel cohesive. This is interesting, but I can't say that it feels cohesive. It's particularly the second book. The second book almost feels like it was written by someone else or the editor was on sabbatical and something happened. So just so many ideas, so many ideas, so many ideas, so many ideas. And the conclusions, I won't get into detail, but the resolutions of different things, it's interesting but peculiar and feels like a different plot than the first book, which was confusing. So, what the hell happened? I don't know. What I will say is that although I love this book and I enjoyed the series, these two books pulled this one down, and I'm not sure I would reread this entire thing because of books 2 and 3. And that's a very weird feeling. I don't think I've ever had that with a series. Yes, I've had it with movies where the first one is the movie, and then the second and third one, whatever. But this is not The Matrix in terms of the first one being the best, the second one being okay, and the third one, what the hell happened there? This is like, it's just too much stuff, too much information, too many concepts. And it's the type of series that would have benefited from trimming a bit. Also, not every character needs or deserves a redeeming arc. You can't be an asshole for 2 books and then suddenly get a redeeming arc. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in real life. I'm saying that it felt forced. And also, how did we start from outing a secret organization and saving kids to a love story? It's weird. And again, I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm not saying that it's not worth your time. I'm saying that this book kicks ass and these 2 books are like, what the hell happened? The best way that I can describe it, if you've ever read the Dune series, the first 3 are mandatory. The 4th one is optional. You need to read the first 3 to get the 4th one. The 4th one is out there. And then books 5 and 6 feel almost written by a different author. Particularly this book. So, in conclusion, if you have a great idea, develop it to the maximum. If you have more ideas, you can include them, but don't include every single idea in a book or a series because it gets to a point where it's clunky. That is my opinion. Some people think that this is the cat's pajamas and that it has no faults. Power to them. I'm happy that they enjoyed it so much. I hope they reread it countless times. For me, I think I'm gonna gift this series to someone or gift it to charity. I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. While I figured that out, reading this gave me a little bit of peace of mind with my series. Because although I have a lot of ideas, although I have a lot of concepts, although I have a lot of books that want to fall over, and I'm going to leave that in. This is the exploration of humanity. This explores the body. This explores the psyche and the mind. And this explores the soul. So there's an evolution. And reading this other series gave me a little peace of mind. So at the very least, thank you, Mr. Pullman, for writing this, for excelling in this one, and for not getting gold for these 2. In terms of the concepts, the alethiometer is fascinating. The subtle knife is interesting, and the amber spyglass is there. Anyways, there's a sexy comment section down below, and you might agree or disagree. By all means, check out that section, drop in your thoughts, and let's have a conversation. Till next time, though, enjoy your tea, which I haven't much in this conversation and waffling. But that is good tea, and thank you for this cup that keeps the warmth. So till next time, cheers, peace, love, and Maki rolls. Write on, read on, and enjoy whatever it is that you're doing. Much love.